Thank you all for coming, and it's my privilege to introduce today's writers, who are featured writers, who are Steele and Tony Bowers. I'll introduce them in order, and then afterwards there'll be an opportunity for Q&A and to purchase their books and to eat and chat, and so I hope everybody will do all that. I'm going to start with Steele, who will read first. Tishan is a former COD student who went on to study creative writing at Northwestern University and studied with Stuart Dybek and a number of other writers. His previous work has appeared in the Alaska Quarterly and a variety of other venues, and today he'll be reading from his new novella, Tacky Goblin, which was just published and released by Curbside Splendor this month. He'll be followed by our treasured colleague here at COD, Tony Bowers. And Tony is a native Chicagoan and a graduate of Columbia College's MFA in creative writing program. He also has an MAT from National Louis University, and he's the author of On the Nine, which is a collection of short stories from Vital Narrative Press. He's the 2006 recipient of the Follett Fellowship in Creative Writing, and his work has appeared in anthologies such as Hair Trigger, The Story Week Reader, Expressions from Inglewood, and The Essential Summer Reader. So please join me in welcoming these two writers. First, Tishan Steele.
Yeah, I used to be a student here, and I submitted to the Emerging Writers Contest when I was a student here. And I lost, so thanks. I was sure I was going to win, but no, I didn't win. So I wrote a book called Tacky Goblin. It's a novella, but really it's a diary. I wrote it over the course of 2 years in California and Chicago. The premise is basically I lived with my sister in a one-bedroom apartment, and I slept on the couch. And I paid half the rent, which people only told me later that wasn't right. So yeah, I'll read 3 different excerpts from it, kind of like before I leave to go there, while I'm there, and then while we're leaving again, because we left there. I can't recommend Los Angeles to anyone. It was very hot, and you have to sleep on a futon. Okay, so I will start towards the beginning. Hold on. This is the very first thing I ever wrote for it. It's called Time for a New Phone, September 2nd, 2013. Wait, no. This one's called Bedridden, September 1st, 2013. I wasn't sure when I last left my bedroom. It had been raining for a long time, and the storm washed out any sense of night or day. Out my window it was always the same, dark, wet, and overcast. I stopped leaving my room because of shin splints. A few weeks earlier, the same day my sister emailed to say she had signed the lease on her new apartment, actually, my legs had started to ache. Now I was at the point where I could barely walk, so I was spending most of my time in bed. There was a mold spot in the corner of my ceiling above my bed. It started as a thin black line, but because of all the rain, it had grown to an oval shape, like a mouth. When I felt myself getting nervous about moving halfway across the country, I'd lay on my bed and stare at the mold mouth while listening to the rain patter on the roof. I found this relaxing, almost like meditation. I'd get sucked into it for who knows how long until my mom knocked on the door and said something like, "Who are you talking to?" For the time being, it was fine. But I hoped my folks would take care of the mold before I came home for Christmas. By then, my ceiling would be one wet, twitchy mold mouth. All right, so that was one. I'll skip ahead a few days to September 4th, 2013. This one's called Mold Mouth and Me. I had a weird dream about me and the mouth-shaped mold on my ceiling. It went like this. I was in bed and the mold mouth said, "Wake up." "Why?" I said. "There's someone in your room," it said. I looked around my room. It was dark, but empty. "Not this room," the mold mouth said. "You're asleep right now. This is your dream room, a projection. I'm talking about your real room in the real world. There's someone in there with you." I don't know who it is. Wait, I said. You can be in my dream and the real world at the same time? I'm mold, it said. When you sleep, I drop tiny spores into your nose, which attach themselves to your brain. I've got a private line to your unconscious. But let's focus on the drooling stranger in your room. Drooling, I said. Yeah, he's got slobber all over your face. Do you know anyone like that? No, I said. I tried to wake up. The mold mouth said. He's kind of on top of you now. I can't see what he's doing, but what? I think his chest popped open, as in his rib cage split in two. It kind of looks like a mouth, like me, except I don't have teeth. I had just enough time to picture a gaping chest lined with teeth made of ribs when a clap of thunder woke me up. There was no one else in the room. A spat of rain gusted against my window. I wiped the drool off my pillow and tried to fall back asleep. Okay, so that's in like Chicago before I went to LA. Now I'll skip ahead. Okay, so this is in October now, and I'm living in LA, sleeping on the couch. And my sister got us a pet, so this one's about a pet we got. October 7th, 2013. It's called No Relation. My sister came home with a surprise. I got us a dog, she said. She set it on the floor. It looked up at me, wiped its nose, and burped. That's a baby, I said. Kim was already in the kitchen doing dishes. You brought home a human baby. She shook her head. No, it's a dog. I got it at the pound. I named it Muggins. I named her Muggins. Muggins pulled off her sock and sucked on it. I picked her up again and held her to the light. Muggins is an awful name, I said. Your name is Barb. Okay, so I'll read I'll read the next one. This is a couple days later on October 13th. There's a lot of froyo places in LA. So this is about frozen yogurt, kind of. It's called Weird Dream, October 13th, 2013. I had a dream Lori passed away. Lori's my girlfriend. I had a girlfriend. I had a dream Lori passed away. She fell from the sky, and I barely sidestepped the impact. You could have tried to wake me up before I hit the ground, she said, dusting herself off and picking concrete from her hair. Or you could have tried to catch me, she said. There was no warning, I said. I would have tried if I knew. Here's your warning. She gave me the finger, then she sneezed, collapsed in my arms, and died. Stop looking at me, Lori said in the morning. It's creepy. But I couldn't. The dream had been so vivid that some part of my unconscious was trying to convince me she was a ghost. I shook it off, but even then I had the sensation of watching a home video of someone long gone. She put down her fork full of eggs. I can't eat with you watching me like that. I'm sorry, I said. What, are you crying? Jesus. She brought her plate to the bed. Here, eat this. You're all messed up. She tied her sneakers. You should get out more, she said. It's not healthy to see only like 3 people a day. But I hate talking to strangers. You don't have to talk to anyone, she said. Just see people, look at them. But don't be creepy about it. That's my assignment for you today. Go forth. She took her bag and left. The cashier at the frozen yogurt shop was listing all the celebrities he'd seen that week. Aaron Kilton, Ashley Bancroft, Jimmy Spitzer, he said. I don't know any of those people, I said. That's fine, he said. That doesn't offend me. I know the truth. And the truth is they all walked through that door, and you know what they ordered? He gestured wildly with his arms. They were hairless and gray. He couldn't have been over 15. They all ordered the same thing, organic dark chocolate fudge, just like you. That's got to be a pretty common flavor, I said. You don't have to lie to me. It's a pleasure to meet you, sir. He tried to wink at me, but didn't seem to know how. The muscles in his face convulsed and pinched. It's on the house. Outside, a tall blonde lady stood over Barb, where I tied her to the fence post. Very adorable, the lady said, but you shouldn't let babies crawl around on the sidewalks. It's disgusting. That's no baby, I said. She's my dog. The lady blinked. That's a human baby. It's a common mistake, I said. I handed Barb this frozen yogurt, and she scooped it out with both hands and shoveled it into her mouth. Next, I went to the library where I could do some proper people watching without having to worry about any of them trying to talk to me. I watched an old lady as she tried to eat a hot dog while hiding it behind an issue of Esquire magazine. A librarian pushed her cart of books over to me. "Hey," she said, "you look bored. You ought to read a novel. It'll give you emotional highs and lows you never get in real life." "I already have that problem," I said. She handed me a thick canvas book. "Here," she said. "It's a good one. It's about a guy who dreams that his girlfriend is dead, and when he wakes up, he realizes how much he misses her and how that makes him love her more. He has the dream constantly, and for a while it's great, the feeling he gets when he wakes up, but eventually it's not enough. He imagines he'd miss her even more and love her even more if she really were dead. And so he plots to..." I cut her off. "This is a notebook, not a novel," I said, flipping through the book. "It's handwritten purple gel pen." She snatched it back. "It's a work in progress," she hissed, "and you can't bring dogs into a library." I bounced Barb on my knee. "How dare you?" I said. "This is a human baby." "How was your day?" Lori asked. She was in her nightgown, lotioning up her cracked heels and putting on socks. "I got banned from the library," I said. "Then I bought a basketball, but I couldn't find a hoop in our neighborhood. Then I went out to the driveway just to dribble around, but the ball was dead and I didn't have a pump." "But you saw some people, right?" "Oh yeah, I think it worked. I really feel like I reset my emotional relativity compass." "Well, that's nice," she said. She turned off the light. I fell asleep exhausted and dreamt nothing. Let's see what we got. Actually, that'll be it. I think my time's up. Thanks, guys.
All right. I want to thank the Creative Writing Committee and the COD community for putting this together. It really is a really nice event. It's great to see those books set up in the back there. If any of my students are in the auditorium, the sign-in sheet is off here to the right, so be sure to sign in to get credit for today. Teaching and learning, teaching and learning. All right, so I'm going to read a short story. There are 12 short stories in the book, and they're all set in the neighborhood that I grew up in on the south side of Chicago. It's called the Grand Crossing neighborhood, 79th and Cottage Grove, if you ever are in the city. That's the area that the stories are set in. This story is called, it's the second story in the collection. It's called Something Like Baseball, and it's pretty straightforward. It's exactly about that, baseball. A soft September wind moved the branches of the trees back and forth. The sun was unusually hot for that time of year and beamed down on the gray concrete of the parking lot behind the school. It was a perfect Saturday for baseball. Chris scratched the top of his head, stepped up to the batter's box, and looked out at his crew with his face screwed into a grimace. He twisted both of his ashy hands on the handle of the wooden bat as it lay on his right shoulder. He spread his legs and bent his knees as he got into his stance. His best friend, Ben, was hunched over with one eye closed and the other staring right at the batter's box, spray painted on the wall of the school. He stood up straight, squeezed the orange rubber ball, and went into his pitcher's stretch. His throwing arm went up high over his head, and like a propeller on a plane, came down so fast it was a blur. Chris narrowed his eyes as the orange ball whizzed toward him. Head down, eyes open. He twisted his body and swung the bat over the top of the ball. "Strike two," Eli called from the field. The ball hit the wall and bounced back to Ben, who had a huge grin on his face. The rest of the crew laughed at Chris's exaggerated motions. He flopped over from the swing and had to straighten himself out. Tank stood in the area where first base would be. He shook his shiny head and waved both hands at Chris. "Woo, boy, you blew me down with all that wind," he cackled. Eli was lined up at second, and he strutted back and forth, clapping his hands. One more, one more." Strike him out so we can go. Phil was way out at the edge of the lot in what they considered the outfield. He started to do jumping jacks and called out, "Hey, batter, batter." Strikeout was a game inner city kids invented because there were no diamonds in the rough. So whenever there was a brick wall, kids spray painted a square with an X in the middle to serve as the target the pitcher aimed for. They played with a rubber ball or sometimes a tennis ball. The pitcher would rear back and let it fly with all his might. If the pitcher could place the ball inside the box or on the X as the batter swung and missed, it was ruled a strike. If a kid in the field caught the ball in 2 bounces or less, then it was their turn to bat. Ben hunched over once again, getting ready to let the ball fly. He stared at the strikeout box like there was an imaginary catcher kneeling down giving the signals. 1 finger meant fastball. Ben shook off the imaginary sign. 2 fingers, curveball. Another shake off. Chris blew air from his mouth in mild disgust because there was only 1 pitch Ben was going to throw, and that was a fastball. Chris got in his stance and settled himself. He thought about his grandfather's instructions on batting. Head still, eyes open, swing through the ball. It was his grandpop George that introduced him to the game when he was a real little shorty. Chris loved the game. Grandpop George would sit with him and explain the rules when the Cubs came on WGN. "See that, Chrissy?" he would say. "The right fielder has got to be able to hit the cutoff man. If not, he ain't worth a quarter." Chris hung on Grandpop's every word. Chris's father hated the Cubs and wanted his son to be a White Sox fan. "It don't make no sense for a Southside boy to be no uppity Northside Cubs fan. It ain't right." "Junior, you're talking crazy. Ain't nothing wrong with this boy being no Cubs fan. Besides, the Sox don't come on TV as much. You love what you see on the regular." Chris's father would just wave his hand and stomp out of the room. Chris and Grandpa would giggle and then go back to Larry Boa, turning a double play to Leon Durham. This was a special day for the crew. Both Chicago teams were in contention. Back in the day, it was either one or the other. But having both teams, it was almost too good to be true. In all 12 years of his life, neither team had been this good this late in the season. To top it off, both of their games were on TV. The Cubs were going against the Padres at 1:20 p.m., and the White Sox game started at 3 p.m. The crew couldn't believe their luck. Ben had an idea that they would watch both games at the same time at his house. 2 games at the same time. It was 1986, years before picture-in-picture. The plan was to watch the Cubs game on the floor model, color TV, and then when the Sox game came on, they would bring down Ben's black and white TV from his room and set it on top of the floor model. It was baseball paradise for the crew. Chris was ready. Ben spun his arm like a windmill and stared icy daggers at Chris. Then he stopped in mid-motion. Chris frowned and yelled, "Is this some new pitch you working on, fool? Just let it go." "I would, but your boy is in the way." Chris looked around and saw Fats wobbling towards him. He was the neighborhood hustle man, and even though it was only 1 in the afternoon, he was drunk as 2 skunks. When it came to hustle men, Fats wasn't a very good one. He never had anything anybody ever wanted. Things like 8-track players when the Sony Walkman was a new thing. He would try to sell old school Chuck Taylor Converse when everyone was rocking Adidas. It seemed like Fats was always 2 steps behind. So mostly he stayed drunk and wandered through the hood to pass the time. Fats stood next to Chris, who pushed his top lip against his nose to block the smell. "What you want?" Eli screamed. "We got a game going on." Fats leaned back as if the words themselves pushed him away. Let me get a swing." "A swig? Fool, we don't drink, we're just kids," Chris said. Nah, little man, I want to swing the bat. Don't give it to him, Chris. We got to get home to watch the game. Fats swayed from foot to foot and moved his lips back and forth like he was rubbing in chapstick. I used to play ball back in the day. Let me swing. You used to play ball? Right, Ben laughed. What was the name of your team? The Burback Bums? Right, go sell some squares, Eli laughed. Fats looked at Chris with bloodshot eyes. Come on, I won't even need a ball. Chris' ears shot up. How you gonna do that, Ben asked with a laugh. Magic? Chris shrugged, and against the wishes of his crew, he handed Fats the bat. Oh man, what you do that for? Now we're gonna miss the start of the game. Chris shushed the crew. It's cool. I wanna see how he handles it. Just one swing, right? See, a kid with some respect, Fats said with a smile. Look here, kid. Let me show you how they taught me in the pony leagues. This all-star stuff here. Watch me. Keep the bat at 2 o'clock and keep your hips tight. That's how Rhino does it. Chris's ears perked up again. Ryan Sandberg was his favorite player. It was something about him. The way he fielded and swung was so controlled yet powerful. Chris wanted to be just like him. Fats gripped the bat and shimmied his hips like a dancer enticing a lover. Chris watched him like a great secret was being revealed. And when the pitch comes in the right spot, you turn your hips, drop your elbow a bit, and let it go. Just let it go. Fats said as he followed through with the swing. Chris stared at him like he was fresh off the back page of the Sun-Times. Damn if he didn't look like Sandberg. He did play, Chris mumbled. He knew only a real ball player could put all the mechanics together just right to produce such a beautiful swing. And if it was a real game, as if it was a real game, Chris followed the invisible ball up into the endless blue sky. The others stared at Fats and nobody said a word. Chris was struck by how blue the sky was that day. He had only seen a sky as blue and as massive like that once before. It was 2 years ago, and his grandpa took him and a few cousins to Wrigley Field. It was his first time. They had to take 2 buses and a train to get there. It felt like a journey to a magical kingdom. As they marched through the intersection of Clark and Addison, the excitement danced across Chris's arms, causing small goose pimples to rise like braille against his skin. This way, boys. Chris and the others followed behind Grandpa as his long legs covered enough steps to make up 3 of theirs. On the journey to get there, Grandpa had told the boys of the days when black men weren't allowed in Wrigley. Hell, you couldn't even be on this side of town unless you were a domestic working in some white person's house, he started. Other folk worked and died to make it possible for us to simply go to a ball game. So it's really more than just baseball. Chris would stare at Grandpa whenever he would talk about the past. It was like he was looking into a portal that had opened up in front of him. The grayish blue that surrounded his brown irises seemed to glow, and his shoulders got square and stiff. The inside of Wrigley felt like an old Catholic church with its high stone ceilings and the way the echoes of the people reverberated and filled the space so that it sounded like a million people spoke all at once. Grandpa turned and handed each of them a torn ticket stub and then climbed the flight of stairs. Chris was bringing up the rear. Grandpa stood surveying a great vista of seats in the stadium grandstand. This way, Grandpa pointed. They marched down past the rows of green wooden seats. The grandstand was covered in the shadows of the upper deck. But further down, to the edge, the sun cut across the seats like a lemon wedge. Are we down there, Pop? That far down? Just come on. Chris could barely control himself. The field was coming more into view. The deep and chilly shade gave way to the bright and warm July sun. This is us. Grandpa pointed to an empty set of seats 5 rows back from the first baseline. Chris slapped 5 with his cousins and did a duck dance before stepping into the row. Boy, you know you silly. Grandpa laughed. I'll get us some popcorn when the man comes by. Well, boys, this here is Wrigley Field. What you think? His 2 cousins chatted like excited squirrels while Chris sat in silence. The field was the deepest green he had ever laid eyes on. It reminded him of an emerald he had seen in an encyclopedia at school. The thick ivy that grew from the wall blew slowly in the summer breeze. Chris imagined the secrets that could be held behind the wall, as if the ivy gave way to another world beyond this one. Crews of men of all shapes and colors raked at the infield dirt. There was a spirit that settled around him. It was rich and thick, and it felt like a hug. Chris looked up and saw that sky. Grandpa, he asked, pausing briefly, is the sky different over here? Grandpa chuckled. Nah, Chris, it's the same sky and sun. But I've never seen it so blue before. Son, that's the excitement of a ball game. Everything seems brighter and better. Then I want to spend the rest of my life playing ball then. I understand, Chris. Popcorn's here. And I'll stop there. Thank you.
So T-Shawn and Tony have agreed to answer questions or from you folks if you have any. You guys want?
First off, are there any questions, any thoughts or impressions that come back from either one of our readings? We'll start there first. Oh, I see a question. Yes, ma'am, in the purple.
Tell us about the title on the 9. Is it a bus route?
It is. So it's sort of a double meaning. So the 79th Street bus runs right through the neighborhood. But also, whenever my friends, because the high school was right there, the high school was Hirsch High School, and so we would ask each other before we'd get out of school or before we cut school, where are you going to be? I'm going to be, instead of saying on 79th Street, which sounds very proper, I'll be on the 9. So we just shorten it. So on the 9, because all of the stories are running through 79th Street. Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
At the bulk of them, your story and your personal experiences, or do you go out into the imaginary world and retrieve something from there and bring it in? Is it more of a biography or is it more of fiction?
It's a little bit of both, actually. So some of the stories are from my own experiences, but a lot of it are from my own observations, and then some of it is completely made up, and I won't tell which, because all of my friends and my family, well, is this you? Are you writing about me? And so I completely deny everything. No, it's all imaginary. So.
Mine's all real.
It's interesting the contrast between the two, and yours is much more specific to your experience.
T-Shawn, can you talk a little bit about how your book evolved from a blog kind of into different?
Yeah. So I was a writing student at Northwestern, but this wasn't really anything from that. It was mostly my sister moved to LA before me, and she had a blog that was just like straight about her life. And so I was like, I'll start one. And I was just figuring out how to use WordPress, and I was like trying to do film reviews and then some other stuff, and none of it was working. And then so I was like, I'll just do a real blog about myself, but I didn't have anything to say. So I just made up cool things for myself, like a girlfriend named Lori and a pet dog and stuff. But yeah, so it was a blog forever, and then like my friends and family read it, and then I moved to Chicago and met some publishers who were interested in it. And then so I just cut and pasted it into a Word document. Yeah, it. I mean, so basically, I mean, you're gonna have to buy it, etc. But like bleach and hot water, like anything, it works. So it's because.
Is there more in your book? And then baseball article, a journal.
No, it goes against multiple themes, and so I really love baseball. So one story is about baseball, another is similar, it has some baseball elements in it, but the other 10, a myriad of things.
You said before you read that your story was straightforward about baseball, but I heard other messages.
Ooh, like what?
Well, you opened the door. I did open the door. I heard people discovering aspects of the world that were unknown to them before, and how that opened the world up so much for them, how they were comfortable where they were. Then as they dreamt about other worlds and learned about them, it opened their eyes and their mind.
Pitch perfect, I love that. Because that's exactly how it was for me, and I imagine it to be for so many others. So again, not just my experience, but then using the imagination to extrapolate out, bringing in the collective, if you will, and then trying my best to put it to the page. Yeah.
What's the question?
Authors that influenced us. What about you, T?
Yeah. Let's see. The second half of the book, I get like, it gets a little more serious and more like whatever. Jim Harrison, who just died, he's a good author. Check him out. And then also Murakami and guys like Richard Brautigan, some other people, Vonnegut, stuff like that. Kelly Link was my favorite in college. She's a short story writer. She writes like kind of fantastical stuff. And forever I just wrote in her style. I just aped it. And I would start getting letters back that said like, this is just like a Kelly Link story. You should try to find your own thing. So yeah.
For me, it's a huge list, but I would say some of the top would be Alice Walker, Ralph Ellison, Charles Johnson, and Ray Bradbury, because even though I don't necessarily write speculative fiction, he is so passionate and he goes right to the heart of humanity. So his stories could take place on Mars or it could take place in your neighborhood. It doesn't really matter. So the humanity that Bradbury wrote with, it's something that I always strive for. So it's a really long list though. Yeah.
You're playing baseball with that time. The ball ever travel into private property, and then you see this really irate person come at you.
Well, that's happened before. At that particular setup, it was a parking lot, and so we had plenty of space. But if the ball ever did go over to the fence, then we just hopped the fence and got the ball. Tennis balls, especially those orange rubber balls that you could get, seemed like they would bounce 1,000,000 feet in the air. You wanted to keep those, so you would jump over the fence easily. I saw another hand.
Question for you. I noticed you mentioned dreams a lot in your memoirs. Is that something that you enjoy writing about? Like, is that sort of like an interest of yours that you kind of explore through your writing?
It's interesting. Like, normally when people want to tell me about their dreams, I'm just like, I'm not interested in your dreams. But as like a narrative device, it's like an easy thing to use, and it doesn't have to function in the same way it functions like in real life necessarily. It can be kind of another thing, and with this, it kind of fit to have him have weird dreams all the time, and then things from his dreams pop into real life and vice versa. So like as a tool like that, it worked. And also like keeping like a dream journal is a good idea. You can like pick up weird things. I find like daydreaming, like when you're half asleep, is like the best time to like come up with brilliant stuff that you'll look at later and be like, this is not good. So yeah, dreams they're a good like fodder for content, and also like in a whole different realm, it's like a good narrative device to try out sometimes.
Do you ever touch on violence issues in Chicago while you're growing up?
Oh, yes. There, because the thing is like it's a part of society, it's a part of culture. I grew up in the 80s. Yeah, I was born in the 70s, grew up in the 80s, came of age in the 90s. So on the south side of Chicago, at that particular time, there were a lot of challenges happening. And so it was a part of my upbringing, if you will. Didn't necessarily inform it because I had a really good supportive family, but it was around. So I do deal with urban violence in the some of the stories. Not all of them, but some of them.
So do you think baseball kind of kept you away from living that different life?
Not really. My mother kept me away from anything negative. She was strong-willed and in her own way. She never yelled at me, but she just had sort of this way, sort of like using like Jedi force to kind of maneuver you through. And baseball, baseball again, it has sort of this purity to it. You know, the movement and the Cubs between 82 to about 86, they were just magical. Something about Larry Boa, something about Ryan Sandberg, just the fluidity of it. So I just love the game.
Is there any advice that you guys would give to writers just starting out for like publishing? Any pointers or, you know, how many revisions you had to make or something like that?
You go first.
Okay, so there are about 3 questions there. Revise, 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 revise again and again and again, because that's where the work happens. You know, everybody wants to do, you know, the initial draft and the dump and get it done, but it's like the revision is the nuts and the bolts. And I don't know if I necessarily have a any advice on publishing, but if you write the absolute best story that you can, it will take care of itself. Because I didn't get published until, you know, I was in my 30s, you know. And I'm 42 now, and so I was blessed with this book contract, or this, not even the contract, but to find this publisher. And this publisher and I, we linked together, and we formed a partnership. I was 39. And I had been writing my whole entire life. So I don't have any advice on how to get published. Just write the best story you can, and that comes through revision, 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 revision.
But how did you find each other?
A friend of mine who had published, she teaches down in St. Petersburg, at St. Petersburg College, Community College. She, just a go-getter. She had heard from a friend that a new press was getting started, and they were looking for writers who had a vision. And so I connected with the publisher because, again, he was so small that he just had a Gmail account, right? And so we're corresponding back and forth, and we found out that we had like-minded visions. And so I sent him some stuff, and he said, this is definitely it, and it happened. Yeah.
And in terms of for my half of it, my problem was always finishing stuff. I never finished stuff. So you just got to finish it, and then be willing to have it be just a learning process. Not everything.
You said you came back to Chicago and hooked up, and it's with the publisher.
Oh, right, the publishing part.
The hookup part is that means different things in different social occasions.
Yeah. Yeah, I can't tell you how I found my phone. No. Yeah, I mean, this started, me and a friend were gonna self-publish it as an art project and draw illustrations, and she painted a cover and stuff. But then I was volunteering I lived in Chicago, and I worked at a bookstore, so we have a lot of publishers coming through and authors. And then Stuart Dybeck, it's unfair, but Stuart Dybeck just basically helped me out. Without him, I don't think I would have gotten the jump start that I got.
And Stuart works?
He works at Northwestern. He was a professor of mine. So it was a combination of those things. And I volunteered at the Poetry Foundation and just tried to insert myself into circles of people that I kind of wanted to live the same lives as them. And then you can kind of easel your way in and then get stuff going. Yeah. And then also I self-published, essentially this was a blog, and it got popular relatively within a certain subset of people. So that was just me by myself. So it's just, I don't know, there's a lot of different ways probably.
I want to quickly go back to the revision. Okay, you have to have also a crew of trusted readers, and they'll tell you when it's done, because if you're like me, you'll just keep revising, and you have to give it away. You have to eventually stop and then give it away. So having a team of trusted readers, friends, family, not your mother though, because she'll say everything is good and it's crap, but someone that you really trust, and they'll tell you, oh, this is done, you should send this out. So
Sometimes you can like turn one of those people like your mom into a trusted reader though by being like, but really, and like make her like to be honest. I did that with my sister, so I would show her these. But yeah, so you revise and you revise and you revise. But this started as an exercise, and like I would actually write it in one go. I would have it fully formed in my head, and I think it's only because the posts were short enough. But I would write it in like the half hour before I fell asleep, and then hit publish and then fall asleep and try not to think about it. But again, that came through practice of other things.